It is time for Ask the Mayor on KWBE with Beatrice Mayor Bob Morgan. I'd like to thank last week Dennis Schmidt, Beatrice Municipal Airport Manager, for coming in your place.
I was out of town, and Dennis came in and did a great job, first of all. And second of all, highlights one of the probably most overlooked assets the city has. I mean, you drive by it, you see the airport there, but, it brings in a lot of traffic to the community. And I would say we probably have one of the best airports that you have for a town of 12,500, and it's been kept up by the airport authority really nicely for years. I think Dennis Schmidt's doing a good job, and looking forward on other improvements. And Diane did a great job when she was there. So I just wanted to thank Dennis and just remind people of the wonderful asset that we do have out there.
A lot of commerce, a lot of business factor with an airport like that for a lot of the companies that we have, and the daily flights in, delivering packages and things like that. So
absolutely,
it is a little bit overlooked, I'd say.
Yeah.
Well, one thing we can't overlook is that, I think the last time you were on, we were wondering about, when's the first big snowstorm going to be? And what do you know? Last week, Monday and Tuesday, and then about 48 hours later, another blast of winter. And but in all seriousness, pretty good performance by departments to work through this. And it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of overtime to do what they did, clearing snow and getting things as normal as they can be in a situation like that.
It does, and I think one of the blessed things we have is we have a number of people that have experience in and down almost to a science on how to remove snow. And I think if you look at a number of other communities, and particularly larger communities, they have to contract their residentials out, and that really slows down the process. The other thing that I try to learn something new every day, and occasionally I still do. But I did learn that it seemed like in the first snow that the trucks and the graders were going a little bit faster than what, even I had a few calls about, why are they going so fast? And so at the Board of Public Works meeting that I attended, Jason kind of explained that. In that first snow, everything underneath was still really wet. And if you snow blowed or scooped that snow, you'd really understand that. So you do have to have variable speeds depending on the condition of the snow underneath. And when it's wet, if they don't drive fast enough, it just balls up and it goes off the side of the snow plow. And the next thing you know, you've got a one-way street because everything falls solid shut. Now, there is some inconveniences when that kind of helps block your sidewalk, and you're going, well, why are they doing that? But I thought at least an explanation of that is to try to get as much snow as you can to the sides of the street, and sometimes it slops over. Having 2 snow events in 1 week is unusual.
Yeah.
We have a lot of snow, which causes a lot of issues, but I think the one thing that I have seen, at least from the city's perspective, they did a really good job of getting the snow out of there. And I think overall, the residents have done a good job of getting their sidewalks open the best they can. Sometimes it's a path around where the actual sidewalk is because they just can't get through it. And the tough parts, even on the end of my sidewalk, is the ADA ramps. Those typically, a lot of places don't get opened, and that's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And I think we've done a good job from the city's perspective of trying to work with people. Typically, 24 hours after the snow falls, you should be out there trying to get your sidewalks done from a safety perspective. And it's probably twofold. Number one, it's a city ordinance. And number two, from the insurance company, I think that's always a good, wise thing to do to protect yourselves either. But I think, we've been pretty lenient of trying to make sure people have enough time because that's a lot of snow.
And the thing was with these 2 storms, the weather conditions, it was cold both days, but they were so different in terms of the first snowstorm was a straight down kind of wet, heavy snow, and probably temperatures were hovering around 30, 32 in there. And then 48 hours later or so, you get this other one where the temperatures take a deep dive, and then you have a lot of wind-driven snow over that, kind of just burying the wet stuff that was underneath there. So.
Right, which gives its own issues. And cold weather does too. When you get down to, minus 18 to 20 below zero, we certainly understand we don't want you out there trying to get your walk open. Wait till it warms up.
Yeah.
I can say that, Other people might say, Bob, what did you say? But no, I think we also have to keep safety in mind for everybody. And it's just, it's hard. It's hard to take care of 20 inches of snow, basically, is about what we got. And, one thing I would say is when you do hear snow coming and we do declare a snow emergency, it's really the time to try to figure out, number one, don't park on the snow emergencies. And number two, parking sometimes is pretty difficult if you don't have a driveway or one that's not accessible. What are you going to do with your vehicle? And the better you can get them into a safe place so that we can do a better job on the streets. The streets are better, and then you don't find yourself with your car buried in. Because once your car gets buried in, I'm sure you have a tough time getting it back out. So.
As I drive around, I've seen a few of those, but were there a lot of them where vehicles are buried by both storms and they still might be sitting there?
I don't think so. I mean, they're noticeable. And so you have one car here and one car there, and you're going, oh my gosh, we got a lot of them. Well, in the scope of life, how many cars do we have in the city of Beatrice?
True.
So we're probably talking.
A lot of families have 3 and 4.
Right. If you've got 3 kids that are all driving, and you and your wife have a car, that's 5. And then you got to figure out where do you put them when it's going to snow. So that is a challenge that I know people face. But in the day, I think most people did a really good job. I don't know. I'm not an odds maker, but I would say the 1 cars that we see snowed in are probably the 5%. Category, and that's pretty good.
It always amazes me how in the downtown area, when you have, not a lot of space between buildings, and what do you do with all that snow when you get 2 big storms like this? And of course, now we see the mountains of snow at First and Ella there because the trucks haul that there. But that's a lot of work, really. You can't just push it off and then wait for the next storm. Those truck operators, dump truck operators are out in the dead of the middle of the night, middle of the morning, and it's just like an assembly line going to that site at First and Ella.
It is. Like I said, I mean, one of the good things is A, we've had a lot of people with experience, and then B, we're lucky because we have the equipment to do it.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of good people. As I said Monday night, I am just amazed and I'm very thankful for a number of people in the community, that neighbors and friends that help each other out. And there's an economic upside to this. I mean, if you're one of the people that are in the snow removal business, it's worth a number of dollars just to get your driveway open. Yeah. And so some private, folks had a couple of good runs there, and they haven't had that in the past. So there is some economic drivers there too. You hate to think of snow being an economic driver, but when you think about the people that have yard services and they make their supplemental income based off of snowstorms, they put in long hours. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, they put in a lot of long hours too, and cold weather. So, I think hopefully we'll get through this last cold snap. That puts us almost into February.
And warmer weather seems to be on the way next week.
It does. It does. Better, so. And that causes maybe a little bit of other issues. We want people to drive safe because the melting and freezing is going to be around with us for quite some time.
Before we take a break here, before the program, I looked up your ordinance on snow and ice removal just to kind of refresh my memory what it is. Right. And it talks about the 24 hours to clear your walk and things like that. And, the potential that the Board of Public Works could order having your vehicle towed or your sidewalk cleared if it got to that point. You have an ordinance committee of the council that's looking at things. As you look at this now, do you think there's any room for looking at any changes or things, or you think just kind of leave it as is? It's good enough the way it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I would say is that this was an anomaly.
Yeah.
We don't typically have 2 snows back to back like this.
Of different kinds, really?
Of different kinds. I think the last time this happened was 2009. Yeah. I think the ordinance really has things pretty well spelled out, and I think, the people that enforce those have at least some common sense that says, I know it says 24, but if it's 36 or 48 hours because of the amount of snow, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
One of the discussions that a couple of council members did have is, if you go to Lincoln, you'll find that when they start talking about residentials, well, you can park on one side one night and then the other side, the odds and evens. Mm-hmm. But when you think about how we do it, we're so organized that we typically get the residentials done in less than 24 hours. Mm-hmm. Once we get the snow emergency routes open and it quits snowing, we go to town because we'd like to make sure our streets are open. And it's always easier to get through it on the first couple of passes than trying to dodge all the cars that get stuck in the street.
Yeah.
So overall, I think the ordinance is in really pretty good spot. I think it's something we can certainly read through, but I think overall it's served us very well for a number of years.
Seems like snow and snow removal is something you can't almost have a hard and fast rule for every situation because they're so different depending on how bad of a winter is or how mild of a winter it is.
Exactly, and then you throw temperature in there.
Yeah.
So overall, I'm very pleased with all the residents of the community and very pleased with all the Board of Public Works folks that have to fight that every day. And I thought about that. We also have contractors that are fighting that every day and plumbers that are trying to unthaw pipes. And so when you think about it, there's a lot of people that are sitting there in 15 below zero weather working outside. And so that just can be brutal.
Yeah. Dangerous too sometimes.
Yes, absolutely.
Back with more on Ask the Mayor with Mayor Bob Morgan in just a moment. Back on Ask the Mayor with Mayor Bob Morgan today as we talk about city issues. One thing to note that a little bit of a equipment malfunction in recent days on cardboard recycling, but there is a change on that, an announcement that things are on their way back to normal.
Yes, I just had a text from Jason Moore, and the baler was down with needed parts, and they just finally got it fixed. And I guess we've seen how much of an impact recycling cardboard we have. So for the last couple of weeks, I mean, we couldn't be able to really take cardboard because we didn't have any place to put it. And now the baler is back up and running. I'm sure there'll be a catch-up period, but good news is we'll be baling cardboard once again.
All right. Monday night, the City Council gave second-round approval, second of three required votes on an amended junked vehicle ordinance. And I know the weather was kind of bad, so probably people weren't going to come out, but I was a little bit surprised that you kind of did this to allow for the possibility for the public to have input over a set amount of time rather than just give final approval to the ordinance in one shot. But no one did comment regarding that. Have you received any feedback personally on that change in the ordinance?
I have not. I have not. I think I think there was a number of small things added and fines increased. When you look at, again, a situation where you've got constitutional rights of both neighbors, I think it's in the best place it's going to be. But again, we decided on that ordinance to read it 3 times and have the opportunity for the public to talk, at the council meeting on both of, all 3 nights. And so the last reading of that will be the first week of meeting in February.
Have any of the council members said they got any pushback on it? Or?
Not really. We haven't had much feedback there. So
yeah. I think one of the things you added were boats and watercraft to the definition or whatever.
That is correct.
I was trying to think of any places in town where I've seen a boat sitting there for a long time that maybe is on a trailer with flat tires or what. I don't know. I suppose there's a few.
I think there's a few, yes. I think that was, I'm pretty sure there are a few.
Okay. Another thing on Monday night was I think it was the final payments to the company that did the major water main improvements in Beatrice this past year. And I think back to when that all started on, 4th Street, and then it moved to up and down Court Street from about, I think it was 4th to 2nd, or 3rd or 4th to maybe 13th or 12th.
15th, I think.
15th even.
Yeah.
Then there was a part on Market Street, then back to Court Street, and there was a change order that added cost to the project. And, it looks like kind of an eye popper because when we look at most, change orders, they're of kind of more nominal dollar amounts. This one was in excess of $1 million. Talk about that. What was your reason there?
There's pits involved in each one of those roads. And basically a decision had to be made. As you're doing the work, do you go ahead and replace all those pits? Or do you wait, and when things happen, you end up having to shut down Court Street again? And so trying to get everything ready to go so that we in the future don't have to tear up Court Street the way we did, we went ahead and had those done. And they were done by the piece or the price. And at the end of the day, there just was a lot more of those than what one would have really maybe estimated. And so at the end of the day, it's one of those things that we kind of got caught up at the end. But when you look back, hindsight, we certainly would have gone ahead and said, yeah, we want to replace it anyway. And when you have the opportunity with the SRF loan to be able to do that at 0 and 1% interest, you're not going to have that opportunity again. So it does look like a big price tag, but at the end of the day, it's probably going to save the city significant dollars in the future.
Financially, with the size of the loan, did that fit in fine with that, even with the increase in cost?
It did. Yeah. It really did. So at the end of the day, we're in good shape. We're done with that project. We've replaced, over 100-year-old, pipes in the ground, and so if we have just as good a job as the last one, we're good for another 100 years.
Yeah. Well, and that loan also financed the transmission second line from
it did.
the Wellfield to Beatrice, and I think also the upgrade of the generating system too at the
yes,
at the underground reservoirs at 4th and Grant there.
Yes.
So a lot of work got accomplished as a result of an interest-free loan.
Absolutely. And, we were able to fit that loan payments into our budget pretty easily.
Yeah.
And like I said, in the long run, we'd be doing this over and over and over. And now, there was some pain and heartache with a number of streets that were closed and parking and those type of things. It's over. We're done. We're moving forward.
This was in addition to usually the water department itself has a few mains in residential areas that kind of, which ones are the oldest, which ones have given you the most trouble, so those go on.
Yes, and they, and we had those this summer as well. The water department went and did a number of other mains that were done, and it really helped put us in a good spot. It's one of those things I've always said, infrastructure is not sexy, and it's not noticeable until you turn your water faucet on and no water comes out.
There, yeah. By the way, during the cold snap and these 2 winter storms, were there any water main breaks that you had to deal with? I had not really, maybe I hadn't checked or heard of, but I didn't think there were many problems. But
if there were, which there probably was being that cold, I am not aware of where they're at and how many.
I see. Okay. Got through that one okay then.
Yes.
We can just avoid the, it seems like the bitterly cold changes and the big changes in temperature along with icing up is where you get some problems.
And that wind.
Yeah.
If you've got exposed pipes or pipes along the wall and you got that 40-mile-an-hour cold wind that drives that wind chill down to even 30 below, it doesn't take long if you don't have your water just kind of tapped and running just a little.
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed about in these last storms and the temperature changes and the cold is that, one, Nebraskans are pretty used to winter weather, and two, they're getting pretty good at when not to go outside and just stay put for a while, because I know during the cold snap this past weekend, you saw people out, but you didn't see as much traffic. And even what kind of allowed the street crews to do the originating of snow in the downtown areas on a Sunday afternoon and not have to do that in the overnight period. I don't know if that was the only factor for them doing that, but it did allow that to them to kind of get a jump on that work too.
It did, and I also think that there's a number of we've been through this a couple times. I think the bitterly cold weather with the polar vortex taught us a little bit of a lesson that sometimes, there was a lot of businesses that said, as you know, because they called you, they just said, hey, we're not open. And so I think that helped. I think that helped keep everybody safe.
When you mentioned that polar vortex, and then the news came out this week from the Texas power grid operators about, hey, could you conserve electricity a little bit? I thought, oh no, are we headed down this same thing again? But luckily that hasn't been the case. No,
and I guess as a sidebar, it's kind of interesting. It's like I said, I try to learn something new every day. City Administrator Tobias Templemeyer, I got emails through him throughout the whole cold weather, and our electricity held up very, very well.
Yeah.
And so, again, through foresight and planning at his level, and the person by the name of Kratzke that we have that watches the electricity for us, at the end of the day, our grid held up very well.
And having great maintenance on your local facilities, too.
Absolutely.
Helps over the time and upgrades over time.
Absolutely.
Have to give Pat Feist a little shout-out there.
Absolutely. Well, Pat Feist and all the guys that work for electric company as well, because if something goes down and it's 4 above 5 below zero, guess who's on the pole?
Yeah.
Our guys.
That's a tough job, I want to tell you. UTV registration, you're not that far into it, but that registration requirement went in effect January 1st.
Yes.
If I remember right.
Yes.
And they were, I think administration was saying Monday night, what about 20, 25?
Roughly 20, 25 have already registered.
So,
yes.
Yeah. I suppose UTV would have been a good vehicle on these past few days if you had to get around with the big tires. But is that about what you expected, registration, or just there was no way to tell really how many?
No way to tell.
Would,
I think at the end of the day, we've done. I think the UTV folks have done a good job as well. I mean, summer was kind of a trial period that went, I think, very, very well. I think one of the things that we kind of don't worry about too is you talk about where you bend the rules a little bit. A number of UTVs were out moving snow, and it may have been after dark, but at the end of the day, that's part of their job, and they got things done. So that's okay.
Well, I know when I was going to work in the morning at around 4 downtown, there were a couple instances where those UTVs came in pretty handy with the smaller blade and getting into some areas maybe a big truck couldn't do. So,
I think is it in the state legislature they're actually thinking about a bill where they're allowed for snow removal from sundown to sun up or something. I don't know. So, again, it's just one of those things. Common sense goes a long ways.
Yeah. Back with more to wrap up Ask the Mayor in just a moment. Just a few minutes left on Ask the Mayor today with Mayor Bob Morgan. A couple of things to touch on. Kind of a quick review of some of the things that got done in 2023 on Monday night. When you look at those projects individually and you go through the motions on them when they're happening, you'd think, oh, that's kind of nice. Then you total up the list at the end of the year, and it's kind of amazing how much stuff gets done.
We had a good first year in 2023. 2024, we'll see, but we're going to continue to work on, some of the major projects that we've got, with Dempster's. As you know, we had Merchant McIntyre on a conference call that are trying to find some grant money for us to continue to look at the downtown revitalization and possibly moving the highway. Is that something that'll happen soon? No. I mean, there's a lot of water that has to flow under the bridge again. We have our master plan, as people know. But we'll continue to find ways of trying to move our couple of our goal projects forward. And then there's always going to be a number of things that pop up that we don't even necessarily think about, like, for instance, the waterfall. I mean, that was a project that probably came to us in about February, March of this year, and it turned out very, very well. And so we'll keep our eyes and ears open for a few other things in 2024. I think a lot of things that you might see in 24 might be more planning and trying to figure out the future. Also, 24 is going to be one of those years where I think a number of people will maybe focus on running for office because we'll have those 4 spots available, and so it will be an election year.
Yeah. On the Dempster project with the one building being taken down, do you foresee maybe another part of that coming down this year? Or is that a possibility at all?
It's in the budget. There is a possibility. Again, we have to take a look at the buildings, and I think we have to take a look at what our next steps are there. And again, I think there's some opportunities for some grants. It's the hardest part about that one is there's all kinds of grants in the world.
Yeah.
But there's very few grants that take buildings down. And so you have to kind of wade through. I think Ted and the committee on that found out you got to wade through a lot of alphabet soup with acronyms and those type of things to try to work with, the number of departments to figure out if are there any grants that we can get to help tear that building down.
Some of the things discussed in what happened in 2023 at Monday night's meeting is some of them are much longer term, like the Dempster, but also the trail project between Riverside Park and the Homestead National Historical Park. That's out a few years, but at least it is kind of moving.
It is. It's moving, and we know the funds are there. It's just, it doesn't matter what you do anymore. When you look at the engineering firms that have to design things, they are so busy that even the design phase of most things takes anywhere from 9 months to a year and a half. And then by the size of those projects, it has to be bid out, so there's a bidding out period. And so to get things done is just to get things set up to get things done, you're looking at probably a 2-year window. And so that just takes time. And so that's why I think 2024 is going to, again, be a good year that we line up projects for probably things that are going to be past the end of my term in 2026.
Yeah. You mentioned the Merchant McIntyre conference call you had Monday night, and the lobbying firm from Washington that is working with you on getting grants for various purposes. I liked the baseball analogy you used about, you got one grant up to the plate, you got one on deck, and you got one in the hole. For people that don't know baseball lingo, but we know
Yes.
what they're talking about there. Do you agree with the approach they're taking in terms of kind of looking at it that way? Because, your chances of getting a grant aren't always that great, but you kind of pick and choose the ones you think you have the best chance at getting.
I think their approach is spot on. I agree with them 100%. We get one teed up and ready to go. There's two more sitting there that they're researching and getting ready for. And, I think they've done a good job because then they said it that Monday night. There's all kinds of grants. But you have to look at the grants that you think you've got a reasonable shot at.
Yeah.
Because they're not just going to go for every grant that we could have. They're going to go for the grants that they think we've got the best shot at. And so they've been in the business. They know what those are. They're going to put us in the best spot to move forward.
And that's not even taking into account that there's other municipalities and counties out there that are trying to tap those same grant programs into them. They may say, hey, we have the better project. So it's a competitive.
Very highly competitive.
Yeah.
Yep.
That contract with them, was that a year-long one, or was that a 3-month? I couldn't remember.
It was 3 months, and at the end of 3 months, we extended it for a year.
Okay. So it may take a while to kind of find out, how does that all work out?
Right.
It's whether or not you get that. But the financial impact could be pretty big. The grants are sizable in some cases.
I think the RAISE grant that talks about having some money to move the 136 is about $20 million.
Yeah.
So,
as I was listening to that, I was thinking, some cities could almost employ a separate department to seek grants because it's a full-time job anymore, it seems like.
it's a full-time job. It's specialized, and you could hire a grant writer internally, but you're paying them a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
And so this brings expertise, and they're in Washington, D.C., so they're able to lobby for us right with our own senators and congressmen for not only grants but also for earmarks.
Yeah.
Thanks to Senator Fisher, she gave us, a $2 million earmark to put a new hangar at the airport. So that's the other side of it that's really important, too.
Yeah. Bob, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.